Charlie Vass. I'm with 4D Tech Support. I'm sure some of you have talked to me on the phone at one time or another. My breakout session is going to cover some transformation concepts using the 4D transformation tags. Previously, you would have known these as the 4D HTML tags. Actually, during Miyako's presentation this morning, I got to wondering if anybody was going to be in here or not because, what he covered. And then I got to, after going through that presentation he did, I said, well, I think some people will enjoy this one because I'm not really going to give you the whiz-bang that he gave you. I'm going to give you more the nuts and bolts of what you have to do to be able to do what he was showing you today. So, like I said, I'm Charlie Vass, and let's get started here. 4D has always been motivated to improve the relevancy of the product, and with the new additions in V15R4, and that's what I'm going to be covering. I'm going to be covering what's new in V15R4, not what you've been able to do previously, but what you're going to be able to do using the new R4. It's improving the relevancy of the toolbox and in making life, addressing needs of the developers with being able to use 4D transformation tags and produce valid XML with the tags involved. You might say, well, why do I need valid XML with the tags involved? Well, if you're going to run through a XML validator with the tags in there, you want the little idiosyncrasies of 4D tags not to get in the way of validating that XML. And the reasons you would use a validator is, if you're received an XML shell, let's say from some distant company that you're going to be sharing SOAP calls with, web services, or you've got some involved SVG that you want to make sure is validated. You don't want the tags getting in the way. So you're going to find that there are changes in R4, V15R4, meant to make that process great. Also, make your life easier, 4D block code injection right into a template. That will really make your life easier, and I'll be showing you that in that you can be able to create some code right in a 4D method, copy that code, paste the text right into your template, surround it with the 4D code tag, and have it execute as you would expect it to, as easily as it would in the 4D method, project method itself. Easier debugging, the fact that you can invoke the trace command, drop right into the code and watch it execute. And lastly, we're going to cover some code security. Please feel free to break into me at any point in time. You have a question, raise your hand when you have it. Don't wait necessarily till the end of things. Okay? Up until now, if you were wanting to use the dot separator in a decimal, you had to use a string and XML extension to it there to be able to force the dot into a number. The reason is the string command honors regional settings. So, and based on regional settings, you may not get a dot, you may get a comma. And certain parts of the world use a comma as a separator. Other parts use a dot. In Canada, it can be either way because they're multilingual. And if you're in the French part of Canada, they'll use a comma as a decimal separator, and the English parts will use a dot. Well, when it comes to XML and certain flavors of XML, it wants a dot, period. So if you're doing SVG, it does not honor, it wants a dot. It doesn't understand anything else except a dot in there. So the string command really doesn't match that way. But to force a dot with the string command, you have to use the and XML extension, and then the XML validator will not honor that. We'll see it as not valid. So if you'll look at this code here, there are actually a couple of things in there that will make this code fail an XML validator. It'll produce good SVG once it's run through, but if you wanted to validate your XML before you run it through, it's going to fail, mainly because of the special symbols that lead into it. XML validator won't honor it. Also the ampersand. I'm going to jump around here, and I'm going to give you an example of how that works. We're going to look at a little bit of SVG here, and I'm going to show you first off what does work, or let me show you what doesn't work. Let's take what we would have done in previous years prior to R4, and we're just going to change a line here. Save that. Now we're going to go to one of many XML validators out there. This one happens to be from W3C. Let's link our document that we just updated, and let's just see if it passes the test. And it will not. And it complains about the leading character here. So it will not, it says, hey, this is not valid XML. You can't have that character in there. So that's what we're talking about when you're wanting to validate your code. Certain things about 4D tags prior to R4 will make it fail. We'll come back to this in a little bit. So 4D has now come up with, to be able to overcome this issue, 4D has come up with what's called the $ syntax, and that there are a number of 4D commands, basically 3 of them. Oops, went a little faster on me. That will take the $ syntax. The 4D text, 4D HTML, and 4D eval are the 3 commands that you can use $ syntax with to overcome these issues. Additionally, the solid $ syntax was introduced to overcome some malicious code injection, and we'll cover that a bit later. When you're using the $ syntax, there are some critical formatting points that you need to take care of, in that it looks for the opening brace right next to it, no space in there. If you're using the traditional way, you have to have a space in there, and these are critical, and you cannot interchange that formatting, and make sure you observe that to make it work. So the code I showed you before, again showing you here up top, redone in the $ syntax, you can see below, and that will work, and let me just show you how that would work now. So let's go back to, go back to here. Let's take how we would rewrite that, and we don't need the string command because the $ syntax is only going, and the new, in R4, those commands are only going to produce a dot. They're not going to give you a comma. They're going to ignore regional settings. And so let me save this, go back to our validator, re-identify the code we want to check, and ask it to validate. And it's good. So that's the first reason we've made this change coming up in R4. Like I said, opening and closing parentheses are important. They must be balanced. 4D will scan for a balance of them, looking for the close as well as the open, ignoring those that are encased in quote marks, as I'm shown here, and what the output would be using that command in such a situation here. Let me talk about something here. How many of you are familiar with and understand recursion in the case of 4D tags? Okay, so okay. The way 4D tags works is, and the commands that process it, because you can include other documents that are going to have tags in them using 4D include and 4D eval and other methods, it recursively checks the code until those tags no longer, it's processed them all. So at recursion. Because of that recursion, we found out that there are certain instances in which malicious code could be introduced. You could allow a user to bring in some input, try to include that user input within the code. The recursive nature of 4D, handling the tags until they've all been cleared and all been processed, it could do damage to your 4D tag, to your 4D server or 4D, and I'll demonstrate that a little bit. Because of that, the dollar syntax, they are only recognized on the first pass. They are ignored on all subsequent recursions. So only on the first iteration is the dollar sign syntax going to be honored and processed. On all subsequent passes of a document, it will be treated as just plain text. And I'll show you how that works out here in a little bit. So let's look at, first off, make sure you understand .40 includes, as you can see here, that means it's going to bring in another file. That file could contain also 4D tags. Those have to be processed. That's the recursion we're talking about, the recursive process of handling the tags. And so to make sure that malicious input by a user or something couldn't deal with the dollar sign syntax tags, 4D made it so that they are only processed on the first pass, not on subsequent passes. So that's what we're talking about, so you can understand what we're seeing here. Let me show you something here. Actually, I'm going to do a demo out of order. Nope, that's not the one I want. Okay, so let's look at a little bit of code here. And I'm sorry, for some reason, I can't blow my code up. It's not honoring my, my keyboard shortcuts to make that bigger. But what we're going to do here is when I execute this, we're going to assume here that this right here is some user input being malicious. That he's typed in as his name is quit 4D. And in fact, it does. A second one to show how it can also work is using 4D eval instead of 4D HTML, it also quits it. So there are safe ways to do this to avoid this kind of behavior. First way is your coding. Your coding you need to look at is use 4D text down here because it's going to escape the special characters that make the 4D tags special. So if I run it, and unfortunately I can't blow it up, but you should be able to see that 4D text converted that to the and less than and the and greater than symbols around the tags. So it did not, the maliciousness was ineffective. It's because of using 4D text instead of HTML or 4D eval there. Safe number 2. Here again, 4D eval here, but we're going to use 4D text. And again, it doesn't have an effect because we're using 4D text. Safe number 3. Here again, we're going to use the 4D eval, but because it is not processed in a recursive manner, it's not seen on the first pass through, it doesn't fail 4D or quit 4D or have the malicious intent that was included with the user input. Any questions about how any of that I've shown there? Okay, so I've jumped a little bit out of a line here, but here, just to review. First line of defense is your own coding. 4D text as a way of protecting against HTML coming through as pure HTML, being processed as HTML, and having the effect that the malicious intent was meant to. The fact that 4D text does not do any escaping on the $ syntax is ineffective because 4D only processes it on the first time through the $ syntax. Now, process 4D tags, of which I was demonstrating, turns out that is not the only command of which $ syntax can be processed. In fact, have you ever heard the term eat your own dog food? Okay, it means you run your own code to see how it affects your life before you put it out on somebody else. Well, 4D lives by that code in that it's already running on a lot of its own internal systems, V15R4. Well, because of that, because they were eating their own dog food, they found out quite by accident that using the $ syntax, user input could quit 4D or have other effects. Quite by accident, they found that out. They found it out because these 3 commands, the web send commands, web send text, web send blob, web send file, all process tags as well. Well, it was possible, and they stumbled upon it, that you could have some user input where $ tags were processed on the first pass and was quitting it. How do they cure it? Well, these commands now totally ignore $ syntax. So, could you still write some code that's going to have malicious intent? Yeah, there is one I've found, but that's not on 4D, that's on you. That calls for some really, really bad coding of your HTML. So, just be aware that the first line of defense is you, 4D has closed off all the other ones. Okay, we went through this so you can review. The reason why you want to use 4D tags or 4D text is to escape out the special characters, and so they can't have an effect. And also, when using the $ syntax, it's not processed on the second pass, so it has no effect as well. And I've already demonstrated that. 40 block code injection. I think you're really going to love this one, because I know I do. Anyway, a way for us to put 40 code into our templates and make life a heck of a lot easier. Because of that, it also supports all the flow control, the ifs, the case of, while, all the kind of flow control you could not use previously, you can now use in your templates. 40 code, the way it works after the 40 code, you have to include either a space, carriage return, or line feed, or carriage return line feed. Include then all of your code, and then finally end it out with the closing tag. For an example here, let's look at some until all the way through R3. If you were going to write some code like this, you're going to be using 40 eval, 40 ifs. And amongst other things, it makes it kind of hard to read at first glance. Redone using the new 40 tag of 40 code, it's just like reading in a 4D method. Any questions? And then we'll have a demonstration of that in a little bit here. Trace is supported. Errors are displayed as in normal error handling way, as if you've encountered an error in a project method. And the text between the 40 code and the end must be split into lines using either the carriage return line feed or carriage return line feed. The text that is in the template is tokenized before it's processed in the same context of which process 40 tags is called, which means any local variables you may already have in that method be honored and be able to be addressed right in this code. Also, if you're going to, you can call another method from the code. It's not just solely limited there, which means that you also don't need to use the method property of URL and 40 action for the code within this block to get there. Oh, sure. Remember, this is a pure block now of 40 code, and it's being processed the exact same way as the project method or whatever sees it. So it can call another 4D method as if it was in a 4D project, and it doesn't depend on the other property existing for it to be able to call it, and I'll show that to you. Okay. Lastly, it must always be written in U.S. English. All the code is in U.S. English. 4D coding is now done in only 2 languages, French and English. Used to be done in multiple languages. I can remember seeing code written by Thomas Mall that was actually in German. 4D dropped other languages. Exactly what version I don't remember, but right now it only supports 2. And all indications are in future versions, even French will go away as far as the programming language is concerned. It'll be only English, much in the same vein that other programming languages are in English only. So let's go look at a demonstration here. And so. Okay. So actually, this is a database that I adopted. I didn't have to write this. It's already existed and had a number of examples here on how to process 40 40 code. And so let's just kind of run this first one here. And it draws some really pretty SVG charts here. Now, I've added one, which is the exact same, does the exact same thing, but it's using now the $ syntax and 4D code instead of, and we'll look at that in just a second. Same effect, but a lot cleaner. So let's go first and look at what is the original code that went to produce this graph. Not all that easy to read, and in some cases here I've even created a comment so that you can see where new stuff. Notice how prior to V14R5 you couldn't do this, but with the added code it makes life simpler, and this here is commented out just so you can see the fact that you now have the 40 else if tag in there allows you to do some better flow control using the old way. But still you can see this is really not easy to read, especially if you're going to also include the tokenization as well. So let's go and look at number 9. Wrapping all of that now, all that code that you saw before that was using 40 eval on every line, we now simply started off with 40 code, and now there's a case statement in there that you couldn't have before. All this processing getting done, reading exactly as if you were doing it in 4D. Oh, yes, sir. Go right ahead. Well, this here does not return any text. This tag does not return anything. It simply does processing. Sure. You know, put whatever you want into if you'll notice, look, I mean, you've got a local variable here that could have been, as a matter of fact, that dollar value, if you look at it, it was not even declared. In this code, I don't believe the C definition of dollar value is not here. It's already declared in the project method that's then loading this template and executing this code. So if you want to put something back into dollar value or another variable that you could see after it's run, not a problem. So let me see. I've got shift down here, but unfortunately shift also kicks me over into this other thing. Let me see how I can, let me see here. I want to try to run this. I want to run it in such a way I can show you. Let me see if I can pull this off. Okay, we're in number 9 here. Yeah. It keeps. Yeah. Okay. So now we're inside that code that you see in the template, and it's been parsed just like regular 4D method. Now you can step through it any way you want. You want to see what the value of what is what we're looking at, dollar value. Right, at this point, it's undefined, but you could predefine it, then use it, after it had run. Questions about anything you've seen here so far? Okay. Okay, method get code has been updated for a number of great reasons. First, it's now pretty printed, and if you'll notice, what you used to get was just all left justified, and it was up to you to try to figure out exactly follow through. It's now pretty printed, just as in the method editor, indented using tag spaces, and has a new parameter that will allow you to have the tokens that you saw, the C commands for the commands, but not only for commands. If you'll remember what we looked at here, I don't know if you noticed it or not, but also constants are tokenized. Look at the K at the end of some of these lines here. Let me see, where's my cursor at? Oh, right here. Notice at the end of that line. So it added also the constants, the tokenization for constants as well as for the commands. Like I say, it's the third option here. One, you can use either the constant or the number 1, or you could use 0 or omit the third parameter for the tokenization to go on. So as an example, you take your Self-40 method, run it through without the new third command or having a 0 there, and you'll get what you normally used to seeing. However, it is now pretty printed. Adding the constant for code with tokens, and now you get your constants, and it's also pretty printed. Now, that brings us a nice little side binny that is on your USB is a component I wrote called the tag tool that addresses a number of issues. Prior to the change in the method, tokenization, if you've done it, you know is laborious. You've got to figure out what is the number for the command, go back and put it in. Next line, what's the number for the command, go back, put it in. If it's the same command, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. Well, I've included a component called the 40 tag tool, and it's on your USB that will do that for you. Let me give you an example of it. Okay. Now, first off, I want to show you something here, and under methods for components, let me close this one here up. This is a code that is in the tag tool component I've included for you, and if it senses that that the version you're in is less than v15r4, it's going to run it through. It's going to get the text normally without any additions to it. So it'll work prior to that. And then it's going to call two commands that project methods I've improved here, developed and included, that will go through your text for you and tokenize it for both commands and for constants. So that's a little binny that you've got on your USB from here. And an example, and also it's meant to run using a macro. So an example here would be to brings it up, and there is that command. Sorry about that. Oh, come on. Okay, so there's that project method properly processed to include everything, and you can then copy it and put it on your clipboard or save it to a text file. But now in R4 databases, you should be able to go through and do it with a lot less work, a lot less labor in doing that. Questions? Also, if you don't want it in there, you can put down the Shift key and it will give you the code without. Well, actually, I didn't include that. That's a late modification I made. It's not included in yours, but it's easy to do just to detect the Shift key and whether or not you put in the parameter or not. It's easy to do one way or the other. Okay. Last thing, when it comes to writing the template and coding it efficiently, is having a text editor that is going to help you out. There are a number of them out there that support macros and snippets. My favorite one is one called Sublime Text 3. But you can find other text editors that will help you out. And if once you have to start programming any of this by hand, you're going to find having a text editor that will support you in all you do is really invaluable. And so let me show you how that works. Here again, the snippets you need are in are on the USB. But however many, are there any of you in here using Sublime Text 3? Okay. You can do the same thing in BB Edit. You can't do it in Text Wrangler. I know on Windows, what is it, something plus plus, I think supports this kind of stuff going on. So you just have to go in there and play with it. The beautiful thing about, and Sublime Text 3 is cross-platform, so it runs on both PC and Mac. And so if you have one flavor or the other, it doesn't matter. And here again, I don't have any stock in Sublime Text 3. I'm just passing on experience that I've had. But let me show you here. In the list of snippets, I've got every one of the 40 tags have a snippet for every one of them for being entered. And to look at what a snippet looks like, let me see. Open recent. Let's look at, do I have? No, so. Well, let's just run something here. Anyway, oh, here we go. So let's look at a common one here for 40 if. That's what I want to start with, a common one. This is a snippet. it has the content. In this case, here's the line for it. Now, the beautiful thing about Sublime Text 3 and their snippets, they also support tabs. And so the text you see here in $1 is a tab and $2 is a tab, so it makes it easier for you to go ahead and enter things. So if I go back to here, and my keyboard my tab shortcut is now it's ready for me to type in my expression, whatever that's going to be. If I hit tab, it puts me here to finish off what I want to do, and now I can just tab on out to the next thing. So these are examples of what it can do. Now the $ syntax I also programmed into it. I had a snippet for it. And it supports the tab character. Enter in what you want to do and go ahead. So if you're going to get into any serious text manipulation of 40 tags, take the time to set yourself up a text editor that supports macros or snippets and have it in there for you to do it. Because believe me, having to type all of that out, remember all the syntax, is just going to be laborious, time-consuming, and whatever. And I'm going to get you out of here a few minutes early. Yep. And don't forget to do some comments here. Hopefully, I helped you realize some of the things you're going to need to be aware of, what you have to do to be able to do the kinds of tricks that that Miyako showed in a keynote this morning. Questions, please. Any kind of questions? I couldn't have been that good. Yes, sir.
I'm pretty new to 4D. I'm familiar with 4D tags. What is a common application of SVG, or what is SVG?
SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. That's what the SVG stands for. So when you create an SVG image, you can scale it, and it keeps all of its sharpness, relations, and everything. So that's what SVG stands for. It's a vector graphic. So as you resize it, it doesn't pixel out or become distorted. That's what SVG is all about. Now, that's one example of it's being used. If you go on knowledge base, there are tech notes in there that show, a tech note that I wrote that shows how to use the tags for creating email. If you want to do a email blast, and have a template, that all you have to do is just, substitute the data using tags or examples in there. Miyako showed you how to, and examples in there on also how to, in the tech note on how to get the XML out of Excel, put your tags in it for creating an Excel spreadsheet. There are a number of your imagination really is your only limitation on how to use it for doing things and producing things outside the realm of 4D. SOAP is another big use for it, web services, because there's a lot of companies out there that use non-standard type of return envelopes or templates. So you get that from them. You can take their template, something that, let's say, 4D wouldn't produce that the other company would accept from our wizard. But you take their template, put your tags in there, send it through process 4D tags, ship it off, make sure it passes the XML validator, and send it back. Those are the kinds of things that you would do with it. Go ahead. Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir.
So I know this has a little more to do with your talk you did at the last summit, but now with the 4D code, could you briefly in 2 seconds, and so there's 4D text, 4D eval, and all this. Obviously there's the looped ones which are separate, but in terms of inserting that what is the what is an ideal role for each of those? Because like, in one hand, you're saying don't use 4D eval, HTML, use
okay.
4D text.
Okay.
So why are we keeping things that are?
Okay, well, first off, a lot of people have templates out there they've already created. You don't want to make obsolete them. So
Okay.
that's why they're still there.
Okay, but if you were starting from scratch.
Okay, you're starting from scratch. What you'll find out is in my exercise and going through and working with the graphing example that's already there, I tried to use 4D code in as many places as I can. Well, the problem becomes once you, let's say, get inside, and all that code I was showing you, it was prior to you actually starting to declare the SVG itself. Okay, so all of this that you're seeing going on inside of 4D tags is going on before you ever get to the SVG itself being declared. And that doesn't start down to line 600 something. So we've gone through 600 lines of prep before we've ever actually starting to build the SVG, building all the different transitions, the different fields, all the other stuff is what is going on up here. But now we're actually starting to do the SVG. Well, what I found out is trying to include, let's say, 4D code once you've started building the XML itself for kind of breaks it. So you have to, so it's good for doing one, you want to then go back to using your 4D eval, things like that for doing single line calculations. But my experience was once I got into actually defining the SVG itself, the 4D code didn't fit. It's a great place for it early to calculate a lot of pre-stuff I may need. It's not good for once I get into actually forming the XML itself. And remember, when 4D runs this through, all of the 4D tags actually disappear. So all of that code that was in this file, the 4D code, once it's gone through either process 4D tags or the WebSend stuff, all of that's gone. The only thing is left is your pure XML, HTML, or whatever. But, one of the reasons you'd want to use 4D code, one of the primary reasons I can think of, is if I'm supporting a client and I need to put some things in code that are not already in the database, and I don't want to have to recalculate and distribute a database to this guy and all the upset that caused. If I can put that code in a template and that template can satisfy the need that's been handed to me now to go on, then you're way ahead of the game. If I'm explaining to you really what the question you're asking.
I think I have to play around with it a lot. But you had mentioned that you would prefer to use 4D text as opposed to 4D HTML or 4D eval for security reasons.
Well, 4D, I'm probably better off setting down to 101 on the malicious code injection that can go on. 4D text is your first line of defense in making sure that you're not going to come across a tag that 4D is going to evaluate as a full tag. So if you have, all of a sudden you have a 4D eval or something there, not the $ syntax, but the real one, the old one, and somehow a user you've taken some user input, which is malicious, quit 4D, or delete selection, whatever you talk about, and somehow it's now found its way into the tag. If that tag is 4D HTML, all the special formatting that tells 4D that this is a tag to process it is going to go through. 4D text, on the other hand, is going to, he's wanting to send text. If this is going to HTML, I've got to escape it. So it changes it to and left then and right then because it says this is text, not HTML going out. Now, when 4D process tag hits it, it says, okay, this is not a 4D tag, and it doesn't do anything. That's the first line of defense that you can use. The second line of defense that 4D uses is to make sure that the $ syntax is only processed on the first iteration, never on a second or third or fourth. And also, it is not processed at all on the web send commands.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Maybe it was lost, but you put out the function tag and use local variables. So you use those local variables after you get out of that 4D code.
Yes, because they've been created in the context of the method that called process 4D tags, even if it's compiled. But the other thing you have to remember is that code being executed is interpreted. It is not compiled. It gets tokenized and is processed as interpreted code, not compiled code. So in that case, you don't have to. It's always good practice to pre-declare your variables, period. Even in there, I would say always pre-declare your variables. But it's going to, once it hits it, it's going to say, oh, he's putting this is a variable and he's putting a value there. It's going to process it. No. And could you use that variable after process 4D tags? It exists at that point in time inside the process. Yeah, at that point in time, it exists on the stack. It got put on the stack. There's no special stack. It's the stack. It's the process stack, and that's where it is.
Even a local variable.
Yeah.
When is it disposed of?
When the method ends.
The method that calls it, that process tag.
Yeah. When the method called process tag ends, that local variable dies. Anything else? How are we doing here? Okay, still got another 5 or 6 minutes for anybody who wants to ask questions. I'll be here for the whole time. Yes, sir.
Show us your mass mailing now.
Say again?
Want to show us your mass mailing?
Oh, I don't think I have that one with me. You can get it off Knowledge Base. The last tech note I wrote had to do with 4D tags. The last tech note, and it's in there. But off a Knowledge Base.
Remember we discussed about the 4D eval calling the method editor? And I went to it and it says that you have to have a check.
Well,
the method probably has to be checked as readable by 4D action.
4D eval. 4D eval very well may be. I have to look at that, but 4D code doesn't require it. Yeah, but 4D code does not.
That's probably usually 4D action.
The one. Is there anybody who didn't understand what Ed was getting across about why we don't use 4D CGI or 4D action inside of our HTML? Is anybody confused about that? Don't understand why? Okay.
I understand why you would use 4D action, but not why would you not use 4D CGI?
The reason we don't use 4D CGI is we don't want somebody on the outside with just enough knowledge to know that the server that's serving them is 4D. That's why. We don't use 4D action in that regard. We do not expose it in any of the HTML that goes out, either 4D CGI or 4D action, as to what server is working here. However, 4D action is used. I used it extensively. I did a lot of the rewrite to Partner Central that's there, especially the part where you get to put up your company, for where they're going to find a solution developer or whatever, that part of it. 4D action is used extensively, but it's all on the front end for when it's being processed, And I used that before 4D eval came along. Once 4D eval came along, I stopped using it. No. Well, yeah, but for 4D script required that method property to be set. Yeah, so it in effect was still.
Yeah, open it up if you know what the method name was.
Yeah.
By using for the action within scripted text, you're exposing your server for the action.
If you have it in your HTML, there again, I only use it to process before it goes out.
Yeah,
when it goes out, it's not in any of the URL that come back.
You don't publish your method, but
Yeah,
you check
right. It has to be checked. But the most common use you'll see of 4D action, most people, is in their HTML for a form where it says, where you form, yada, yada, 4D action, yada, yada. That exposes it. Never, ever use it that way.
I guess you should have another checkbox on that property. It's clear enough. Yeah, because I don't want to expose my method. Even if they don't know my method name, they can be.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you for coming.
Enjoy the rest of it.